Good to have you both with us. Thank you for giving up a bit of your Sunday. Good morning. You both well?
Yes, it's still Saturday, but yes. No, it's been a long morning.
Still Saturday. It's not Sunday. But we appreciate you. I appreciate the concept of you potentially giving up on paper your Sunday if it was such a day. But I'm even more appreciative of the fact you've given up your Saturdays and the fact that you've kept me on the straight and narrow. If you could, do you want to stay here just throughout the entire output and just kind of, you know, director's notes? I get enough of those already, to be fair. On a Saturday morning, what's on the front page of the Express?
It's Harvey Wilguse's family is calling for knife archers in all schools. I've got 3 kids, so it really appealed to me, this story, because it's one of those things that when I was growing up, they always had in American movies, you know, guns and knife archers at schools, and it just felt so alien and so foreign and so like something that would never come here. But then you hear of Harvey Wilguse's case and you think, well, actually, maybe it is a good idea. Knife crime is completely out of control. Kids buy these things on Amazon. They buy them on the internet. They just all have knives. So it is time, I think, possibly to have knife archers, I'm afraid.
I mean, years ago, I did work with a charity called London Citizens UK, where you'd go into some schools in inner-city London, and this was about 10 years ago now, and some of the schools in the most challenging areas had scanners for when the pupils went in to check for knives or anything else untoward. So it does already exist in this country. And I think, you know, if you really are at fear that something atrocious would happen, then I suppose you don't have much choice if you're looking after those kids' safety. But you wonder about the atmosphere that brings to a school, which is meant to be a place where people thrive and feel comfortable and feel free. You know, that's going to be a pretty harsh environment when you're checked like that to go in. And so, you know, it's far from ideal, but it's probably the least worst option when you have an atrocity like this.
But you think outside the canteen, I just can't imagine my kids, you know, not being safe outside the canteen inside their school. It's just really, really tragic. It was so shocking. And
actually make a good point that might happen when they go into school, but of course people leave at 3:30 and then anything could happen still. But, you know, I think it's a sign of the times, it's a sign of the problems that we have that this is even considered.
And then there was that news earlier in the spring, the Met Police having to cut police officers that are associated with schools, specialist police officers. They've cut those roles. They're being redistributed elsewhere into the community. And that key educational opportunity, a key way of connecting with young people, a key way, potentially, of kind of building bridges so that there is that understanding, that trust that will kind of, you know, percolate through those kids' childhoods more broadly. And you kind of think, well, it's such a tricky period, especially for children, especially with so much online content as well and so much machoistic content that they're being thrown around as well. I don't fancy being a 15-year-old in 2025 at all.
No, it really is the Wild West. I think you're right, though. I think there should be police on the gates. But also, what a sad world we live in where there should be police on the gates outside of school instead of lollipop men, you know, like when we were growing up. Just harmless sort of friendly faces at the school gates.
There was a story, an analysis in the Financial Times yesterday that was showing that people's personality traits are on the change. So things like being conscientious, young people under 25s are significantly less likely to be conscientious. They're more likely to be neurotic than people over 65, and that's a consequence of social media changing our attitudes and our behaviours. And so, you know, when you put all those things together and then you have extremes like this where people are carrying knives and attacking each other, it does paint a pretty daunting picture. And, you know, you see the evidence in that, in the fact that mental health rates are much worse for poor mental health than they were. I mean, when I was at school, there were certainly people that had problems, of course, but it wouldn't even, you know, it wasn't seen as a pertinent problem. And on the one hand, we're doing better to acknowledge it's a problem, but on the other hand, the problem is much bigger than it ever has been.
What do your kids say to you about it?
Well, they are quite little, so I haven't directed them towards this story. Right. But I do worry, because a lot of this is about... He was being bullied, wasn't he? And he said, as he attacked Harvey, he said, you know, I'm not right in the head. And to your point about the bullying and the cyber stuff that goes on, you know, it's one thing just being pushed around a bit outside a canteen, but when he's going home, he was probably getting WhatsApp, Snapchats, Instagram. You know, you never, ever escape the bullying if you are being bullied in this day and age because of social media. So I haven't spoken to my kids about it, but I do worry about that, and I'll certainly not be letting them go anywhere near social until they're 21, probably.
Fair enough, absolutely. I feel very fortunate. It kind of came just as I was at a point of life, kind of late teens, that it wasn't quite so hard. Talking about things getting harder, a bit harder to go on holiday, potentially.
Yes, although this doesn't start until October, so everyone about to go away being August, don't worry. But from the 12th of October, there will be changes which mean if you go into the EU, you'll now have to give proof that you have travel health insurance, proof of your accommodation, proof you have enough funds to get through the trip, and also fingerprints and photographs. So these apparently will be taken at kiosks when you arrive. Now, I have to say, I travel quite a lot, and I can't think of anywhere I've been where they've had quite so many checks when you arrive. As a British citizen, other countries get this, less wealthy countries get this in lots of countries, but as a Brit, I haven't experienced this much at all.
Into the US?
The US and Nepal is the only other place where I've ever been asked these questions. So it quite surprises me that this seems quite a high bar. The idea you have to prove you have money to go on holiday. As I say, I know other parts, people from other countries, that's not so unusual, but it surprises me as well because one of the things that Keir Starmer trumpeted about the new Brexit deal was the fact that you won't have to go in the longer queues.
The e-gates.
Exactly. And so if you're going to have to go through and give all this information at a kiosk, well, I think that will probably take longer than the time saved through these e-gates.
The queues are going to be horrendous. This plays into my new theory, which is that Brits shouldn't go abroad in the summer. So
Nice.
I'm not going abroad this summer. For the
But
first
you have
time in quite a
kids.
long time. And also they're really expensive with the kids. Because imagine doing these queues if you've got 3 kids and a grumpy husband. And also all couples fall out at the airport at the best of times, let alone if they're having their fingerprints checked and everything else.
Yeah.
So Wales and Cornwall from now on for me.
But then outside of summer times, you're still prepared to kind of take on the jungle of airport chaos.
Well, in theory, the queues wouldn't be as bad in the October
fair.
half term.
Going back to that US situation, you get up to that kind of security guard and kind of border agent, and the peppering of questions. I know it's designed to do it, but you feel so thick all of a sudden because you're like, what was your last career? You're like, where are you staying? What do you do? Do you normally do that? You normally, and it's so fast paced.
It's already like that when you go through the security queues and you immediately think, oh, my God, I'm smuggling guns and drugs. Of course I'm not. But, just going through those things, you suddenly get quite paranoid, don't you? And when you're asked in America about your bank account balance and you think, oh, God, I'm overdrawn, oh, I'll never get in, it makes you completely paranoid that you've done a crime you haven't done.
Did you pack your bags? Well, I'd asked the other half to do it, but he said no. So did I do my...
But I think it will be a real concern because this adds a lot of time. As you say, if you're a family, this really will be quite stressful. And it's that idea of sort of layers of bureaucracy, challenges, and will this mean that fewer people take EU holidays? Will this damage their economies? Of course, places like Spain have been protesting to get rid of us, so maybe if fewer people take these trips, they'll be quite relieved.
Well, is that why they're doing it? Why is it that Britons are being targeted by these rules?
Well, it's non-EU passport holders, so I guess we fall into that bracket.
But we thought we had special treatment, but it seems
Yes,
not.
I thought we did too.
Interesting that it didn't quite work out as we maybe thought it was going to. Let's talk about front page Daily Mail, shall we?
Yes, so this is militant eco-activists have joined forces with Palestine Action. So we're going to have up to 500 people descending on London this weekend. There's going to be 3,000 riot officers. And what it is just agitators from all over the left now are joining up. And Just Stop Oil, I suppose they've been looking for somewhere to go since it sort of more or less got disbanded. And so they're all joining forces. It's going to be completely chaotic. And I suppose the Mail is begging the question, are these agitators just for the sake of agitating? Or are they really invested? Because one minute it's Just Stop Oil, the next minute it's Palestine, sometimes it's trans rights. It's kind of a big soup of all the different issues all conjoined together.
It was a sharp intake of breath then.
Yes,
No, I was just breathing, I'm afraid, but...
I'm pleased you were, please don't be afraid.
Let's see if I'm still breathing on Sunday. But what I would say is that, prescribing Palestine Action is understandable in the sense that some of their actions are pretty shocking, pretty disruptive, pretty unacceptable in my view. But what it's caused is these huge rallies. If 500 people are estimated to turn up on Saturday. Now, as a protest, that wouldn't be so many. But if they have to arrest all those people, this is going to be a real problem for police.
Real problem for police, and I'm sure there'll be lots of clips on social media that will go in one direction and another and will be used by both sides to kind of make their counter-arguments, counter-claims. You're both going to be back here all through Saturday morning. We're going to stick with us for the day's top stories after this short break.
Hear that whistle?